Joining me is Jonathan Tobin, the editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. Thank you for taking this time with me on the inaugural session of your first conference.
It's great to be with you, Felice. It's wonderful.
What do you want to gain, or the message that you want everyone to walk home with? And I don't just mean about JNS, about the topics in terms of the conference.
I want people to understand that this battle is a battle of life and death for Israel. It's a life and death battle for the Jewish people, especially in the United States, as we're facing this unprecedented wave of, war, this wave, this surge of anti-Semitism. But I want people to understand that this is about something broader. This is about a war that so-called progressives and their Islamist allies, this bizarre red-green alliance that has made itself felt throughout the world, in Europe, and now on American college campuses as well, that this is a war against the West, against the foundational values of the American Republic. The Jews are the immediate targets, but the real target is America itself. So when people criticize, for example, President Trump's efforts to get rid of anti-Semitism on American college campuses, and they say, even those who admit that anti-Semitism is a problem, they say, well, you're going too far, you're not just talking about anti-Semitism. I say, of course he is, if he's doing it right, because the target is all of the West.
Anti-Semitism, demonstrations on campuses, those are two very strong topics, but then you kind of couple it with also the messaging, social media messaging, and you have one hell of a cocktail. Is the Jewish community equipped to handle these threats?
The organized Jewish community hasn't shown that it's even aware of the magnitude of the struggle that faces them. Let's be honest. The American Jewish people have been failed by their leaders, most of their leaders of the great big organizations that are well-funded, that actually have a job to do to defend the Jewish people, to defend the West, as I said. And many of them have just fallen down on the job because they're much more interested in partisan politics, remaining in sync with their liberal allies on other issues, who have abandoned them and the Jewish people because they see the world through this bizarre ideological prism of race, and that somehow that the Jews are white oppressors. And that the Palestinians are somehow people of color, and when this conflict isn't about race at all, and it's a totally false construct. The organized Jewish community hasn't even begun to fight this battle. This is a broader war. We need, as a community, speaking of Jews, to unite around this effort, to defend ourselves and to defend the values. Of course, I don't see many of our leaders joining this battle. I see all too many of them joining the battle against those trying to do something about it.
Well, let's take that a little bit further. President Trump has just been trying to punish the institutions that are hailing the anti-Semitism and taking part in this across the United States. In some cases it's working, in others it's not. Did you ever expect that Columbia University, your alma mater, be really at the forefront of a lot of these problems?
These mighty institutions like Columbia, like Harvard, like Princeton, are violating Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. You're violating the law. The law says you shouldn't get a single cent of federal money if you're discriminating. And the point is, we know because this has been around, this is an issue that's 60 years old. We know that when schools discriminated against African Americans or Hispanics or other protected minorities, we know that they'd be canceled in a second. And that schools that didn't want to go along with anti-discriminatory policies, even when they were overly broad in their interpretation, mandating affirmative actions, other things that really weren't good ideas, if they didn't want to do it, they had to just accept the fact that they would take no federal funding, and some institutions have. Well, you know what? The tables have turned, and Trump is doing the only thing he's attempting to do, the only thing that could actually make a difference, which is defund institutions that are violating the law by either tolerating or encouraging anti-Semitism on their campuses in many ways. And you don't just do that by talking about anti-Semitism. Trump is right. The woke catechism of DEI is at the core of anti-Semitism in this country, along with critical race theory, intersectionality, settler colonialism. These are all things. He's not interfering in academic freedom because, let's remember, if anybody was teaching at Columbia or Harvard, preaching segregation or racial discrimination against blacks, and no one should, they would be fired in a minute, and if the schools were tolerating it, they wouldn't get a single cent.
Iran's nuclear proliferation remains one of the leading news stories. Do you think President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are on the same page?
The one issue on which the Trump 2.0 administration seems not to be speaking with one voice is Iran. There is a faction within the administration that wants to go soft on Iran, that is in fact advocating for policies that are no different from those of the Obama and Biden administrations. That's a problem because that's not what's in Israel's interest. Quite frankly, it's not what's in America's interest. Iran is a threat to the West as much as it is to Israel. Now, the question is, how does it go forward? Now, I don't blame President Trump for trying negotiations before he attempts anything else. That's a reasonable course to follow. Question is, what sort of negotiation are you conducting, and what kind of a deal would you settle for? We know what Obama and Biden were trying for. They were not so much trying to go soft on Iran, is that they wanted an entente with Iran. They wanted Iran to be America's ally. That's what Obama was about. It wasn't an accident. He was seeking to appease Iran. I know President Trump doesn't want to do that. And I know also that he's smart enough to know the difference between a good deal and a bad deal. He himself said that the Iranians are used to dealing with stupid people from America. He was exactly right to say that. Unfortunately, I think some of the, to name one person, his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, who has said a lot of really dumb things about Iran, who is in fact compromised by his own dealings with Qatar, which is Iran's ally and the funder of Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. I think he's one of the stupid people that President Trump was talking about, even though Witkoff is his friend and he's sticking by him for the moment. We will have to see what Witkoff comes up with in this negotiation and hope, and we have reason to hope, that President Trump is smart enough to know that he should not agree to another Obama-type deal that will just empower and enrich Iran rather than actually solving the problem.
More and more, it appears that there are two Jewish communities in Israel and two Jewish communities in the United States. Is the world Jewish community so fractured beyond repair?
What they're divided on is Benjamin Netanyahu, and that's politics. That's normal. It makes itself felt in a lot of very toxic, I think very unhelpful, wrongful ways. But still, I think there's consensus on the important issues. Now, in America, you're talking about something very different. We have a lot of people who are connected to the Jewish community by blood, by their ties, by their mindset, but they really don't have a sense of Jewish peoplehood. We are undergoing a plague of assimilation in the United States, the American Jewish community, where we have many American Jews who don't have a sense of solidarity with other Jews, with the state of Israel. Their ties to the Jewish people are very indistinct, kind of like Elizabeth Warren's ties to the Cherokee nations.
Jonathan, but honestly, you don't have either side speaking to each other. We're inviting other perspectives to each other. And you see much more of that today than you and I both know existed, and I know you a while, years ago. What do you attribute that change to? And how can that kind of come back, or will it ever come back?
Well, that's a good question. I think Americans are deeply divided, more divided than they have been in living memory. They're divided not just on politics, but on culture. They're on differing sides of this great battle over Western civilization. We've had a generation of Americans indoctrinated in these toxic ideas that are not just being taught at Columbia and Harvard, they're being taught in K-12 schools around the country. That's a big part of the problem. That's part of the spiritual war that we're seeing. It's the breakdown of our society as a whole. And yes, we're not talking to each other because we live in a social media world where everybody lives in a silo. We've lost the habit of disagreement. But we have to have faith that the truth sometimes does win, that these toxic theories and this American exceptionalism is something very special. It defeated Germany twice, Japan, the communists. I don't believe America is going to let itself be licked by DEI woke culture and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders. They're not going to beat America. I believe America will survive this and go on to greater and bigger things, just as Israel will survive this war as well.
Jonathan Tobin, Editor-in-Chief of JNS, thank you so much for taking time with the Media Line.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.